Crusades was always part of my DNA. It was one of those periods in history when I was at school that was most interesting because it was so colorful and violent. And when I was at school, of course, I was less enamored by the idea of politics and religion. I was more interested in the kind of cowboy stuff, you know, the armor and the swords and the violence and the fighting. And also, as all of us probably, assuming that the Muslims were the bad guys.
One of the things actually Ridley did talk about was that he always felt that if there was an era of epic making, that the Crusades would have to be covered. It's such a monumental time in history, and it's never been explored before.
It's a very important period, and it's very relevant to today to understand this period. It's totally comes up to date with what's going on in the world, so it's creepily topical.
Ridley was always, I know one of the subjects he's always wanted to make was a Crusades film, going, right back, since I've worked with him, there's always been the talk of wanting to do a film about the Crusades and detailing that struggle and that period of history.
Right, stand by to shoot, guys.
I really like to create worlds. I really enjoy that. It's really fun to set up the idea of creating this enormous proscenium. But in this case, I'm building Jerusalem.
He's battling for his film. He knows what he wants, and I think he's known it for a long time. He wants to do something that's very special. He doesn't want to just pass by. This one needs to be right.
Ridley walked into my office one day and he said, just out of nowhere, for the first time I had never heard a word about it, he said, I want to make a movie about the Crusades. And that was it. And I said, oh, okay, got it. And then walked away. And then later we talked about what do you want to do exactly? And he just wanted to do that period. He had always been interested in the Middle Ages in Europe and the feeling of that time. He'd been interested in knights and who they are and what they do. But we were never sure what exactly about the Crusades. We knew it was hundreds of years, and we knew there were hundreds or thousands of stories that could be told, but we weren't exactly sure which one it was going to be. We were submitted a lot of projects about the Crusades, several books, so we heard a couple of pitches, but Ridley really wanted to do his own. He wanted to fashion it with the writer on his own and start really from scratch.
I'm definitely a frustrated writer, and I wouldn't attempt to do it because I couldn't write as well as the writers I now can afford to hire. Life's too short, for me. These guys have their talent, and I respect that.
We knew we had to find the right writer to capture the period, and then we figured that we'd work with the writer to figure out which story to tell.
I had a script called Tripoli sitting around for about 8 years, and it finally got to Ridley, and he said he was going to make it.
Tripoli, of course, is about 1805, where Britain is at war with Napoleon. Napoleon is kind of ruling the waves, certainly in the Mediterranean, and has just sold from Louisiana to the Pacific for $11 million because he needed the money. And Thomas Jefferson has now emptied his coffers of everything he's got. So in the Mediterranean, there's very few American ships, but you've got a lot of trading ships in the Mediterranean. And at this particular time, there was a character in Tripoli called the Pasha Beyshov, and he was running basically an extortion racket, piracy. So this is why the Barbary Coast is associated with piracy. And that would have been with Russell Crowe, who's going to play this man who was the vice consul for Tripoli, who decided to actually conduct his own foreign policy personally, because the United States couldn't afford to, didn't want to get involved. He drummed up his own little private army and tried to go against the Pasha Beyshov. That was a fantastic project.
So Ridley was shooting Matchstick Men, and every day after he would wrap, he would come back into the office and he would deal with the team that was working on Tripoli. because we had full-blown team set up. We had Arthur Max, production designer, Terry, Bronco. We were doing budget, schedule, casting, and we had a huge warehouse set up with drawings, designs, models, because we were going to have to build an entire city on the coast of Morocco.
It's just one set though, ready? Okay.
Lights first.
Okay, shit.
Wow. That was like changing rooms, actually.
Let's call Bill. Let's call the dream comes true.
Not yet.
This room is 100 by 100. We can use the inner courtyard, this, and we do the Pasha Pasha at night. You'll never recognize it.
So Ridley would finish shooting in the afternoon early on Matchstick, come and we'd work on Tripoli till late at night, and then we'd do story meetings also all weekend.
During the meeting, he asked me if I had anything about the Crusades. And, you know, the usual nightmare would be that you didn't, you know, sort of like not having your homework. But as it happened, I did have something.
He's an expert on this particular, it's a passion for him. And so when I went to him, I didn't realize that. He said, oh my God, this is what I really want to do.
The minute Ridley said Crusades and did I have anything, the first thing that popped into my mind was Baldwin of Jerusalem in a silver mask, which had been, you know, haunting me since I was about 14 years old when I first read about the guy. And you always store things away. You never know what's going to be useful later. You never know, for example, when Ridley Scott's going to say you have anything about the Crusades.
Tripoli was a fantastic writing sample. We knew from Tripoli that if he could write that script, that he could give us a Crusades. Tripoli almost happened 3 times. I think we had 2 green lights, and occurrences just kept happening that would stop the movie at the last second. Arthur Max had been working on it for quite a long time. We had all the locations, we had done all the scouts, we had spent quite a bit of money on it, and we were ready to go.
We actually built in the Derna Castle, the fort. I was building, I got that close. I was building this 4-acre fort. Cut long story short, it flatlined, didn't happen.
3 different times, 3 different situations stopped it in its tracks. So by the 3rd time, Ridley was really ready to make a movie. And exactly at that moment, Bill delivered his first draft of Kingdom of Heaven. It was long, and Ridley and I took it home for the weekend. It was Thanksgiving weekend. And he read it, the first draft, the first time, and he said, this is it, I'm making it, I love this. I'm making this movie. The other thing that was great about Bill is he loved research, and he read every book there was about the Crusades, whether it was from libraries. We bought him every one we could find, and he really made himself an expert in the field before he even sat down to come up with a concept.
I already had a pretty good library to begin with, and during the research process, Scott Free sent me everything I asked for, which in the end probably amounted to, you know, a couple of $1,000s worth of books, including some pretty hard to find stuff, which was nice. But it's all original sourcing. I mean, it seems to me the only way to write a historical piece.
Bill had known about this period, he said, from when he was younger, and there was one thing that attracted him, which was this concept of a leper king. Just visually, what is that about? How can you be a king and be a leper at the same time? So there was that aspect that made him look at that period. And then looking closer at that period, it was there was détente going on, where you had everyone living in a city and trying to hold on to this tenuous peace.
This period was interesting because it was an interval of, if not peace, at least cohabitation, you know, accommodation would probably be the better word, between the 2 civilizations in the East at that time. And it's simply more interesting than, you know, a period of outright war.
So once he decided that that would be the period of time, then we started exploring who were the parties involved, who was in Jerusalem, who was causing trouble, who was trying to keep the peace.
You have Saladin, you've got a wonderful character called Baldwin, who was the leper king, a great character, his sister Sibylla, and some other wonderful people such as Renaud, who was really a bad guy, and Guy de Lusignan, who was also really a bad guy. And we're just before Richard the Lionheart.
And then once he figured out that that would be the time, the very most difficult thing was who was the lead character and who was going to take us through that journey. Balian was the guy who surrendered the city of Jerusalem. There's not a lot of information out there about what else he did, so we did dramatize a lot of that. But we knew that he had a relationship with Saladin, that they had had conversations before the surrender, and that he did surrender. So those were the three things. You have Balian surrendering, Jerusalem, Détente, and the Leper King. And those were the three things that we talked about before he started writing. And then once we got that draft, then we had a lot of work to do.
I can't remember whether it was 186 pages or 168 pages. I think it was one of those, but I do know it scared the shit out of everybody. And it was quite long. I put everything in.
Obviously, when you're making a movie, you have to dramatize things, and you can't have every single detail and every single character and every event that happened during a period of time. So that was a lot of the work we had to do from the first draft into the 70 other after that. But when you deliver the script for the budget, you know, the first thing everybody looks at is how long is the script and how long is the movie going to be. So we had a parenthetical meeting one day because Bill loves parentheticals. And they're actually really charming and funny and informative for probably an actor or a reader. It makes the read enjoyable, but every piece of dialogue had a parenthetical in front of it. So we went through one day and we took out every parenthetical in the movie, and no, I wasn't very popular that day, but we got the page count down by like 20 pages. So, you know, it didn't affect the movie, but at least, you know, the people who were paying attention to those things, it made a difference, I think.
My job is to give them as much help as possible in terms of how I suddenly see some of the characters, or say, yeah, we can do this, but more of this, more of that. It's really about enriching the process. On 53, King says, and when one day I'm helpless, perhaps you'll protect me, a beat. What happens if he says, so, let's play, right?
Yeah.
Yes. He says, it's your move first, something like it's your move first, and I will explain the implications as we go. So
Right.
when he comes out into the corridor, he's been there fucking hours, which is interesting.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You wonder what went on in the room with the king, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to...
It implied a hell of a lot more education,
Absolutely.
right?
For him to play chess.
Yeah.
Particularly if he looks baffled and the king smiles knowing he's baffled and says, don't worry, I'll explain every move as you go.
One of the things that I find most useful and interesting that Ridley does when we're developing screenplays is he starts carding it. He brings in a huge bulletin board and he takes the cards and he personally writes out every single scene or sometimes even shot in the movie. It's how he begins to visualize what he's going to be shooting. And it really helps to figure out what the movie really is starting to look like in structure form. And at the end of the day, we take the cards down, make a photocopy, give them to Bill and say, go write these cards. And it was the way of sort of taking notes in the meeting, but it was also really the way Ridley starts digesting the story and really finding out what he loves, because there's certain things that always stay in and the things that are movable and shiftable. The other thing that he does is while he's writing cards, he has the draft of the script and he goes through every single line, every line of description, of dialogue, and he writes on almost every line. Every page is covered with his handwriting. And we would keep all of those drafts. And by the time we got up to something like 70 drafts, he'd say, let's get that draft from October of last year. And he remembered everything that was ever written in that script. So it was always about getting everything in that he wanted to have there, and still, of course, keeping it cohesive and streamlined.
Working with Ridley is like a dream come true. You know, if you're going to work in the film business, you want to be working with Ridley Scott, and especially on movies like this.
Bill was really good in the meetings with Ridley. Most writers really enjoy being with the director who's visualizing what they're putting on paper. So, for example, if Bill writes the Kerouac sequence, what Ridley would do in a story meeting is start drawing it and saying, okay, well, what do you mean? Well, where does this go and what's happening over here? So suddenly you get drawings also on the table. You've got cards, you've got the script, you've got drawings, and Ridley's drawing everything, you know. How, does it look like this? Does it look like that? And then Bill would realize, oh, well, okay, I need to adjust that in the script.
So they can disappear?
Well, yeah, they can, yeah, they would disappear.
These dunes are maybe 40, 50 feet high.
Oh, all right.
While we're working on story, Ridley always starts pulling his key players together. Even, I think, before the studio really got a good look at the script, Ridley was already kind of sending it to Arthur, to Terry, you know, to start to think about where we could shoot it, how it would look. And when he submitted the script to Fox, he wrote a really simple letter saying he was very excited for them to read the script, and this was going to be his next movie. So that was an exciting day and a nerve-wracking day, but they were really happy with the script, and things started really progressing after that.